Hello, everyone, and welcome on Education Futures. If you're listening to this podcast and if you enjoy listening to it, please give us a 5-star rating. You can find the button on your Spotify or your Apple Podcast account, and that means a lot to us and it drives more traffic to our podcast. So thank you so much. Today, I am here with Alex Sarlin. Hello, Alex. So good to have you on the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Svenia. Looking forward to talking about EdTech.
Yeah, last time you interviewed me for your podcast at Tech Insiders, and now I am the one who's lucky enough to interview you on this topic that drives us both, which is the future of education and learning in the age of AI. So this is what this podcast is about. So, Alex, you have extensive experience in the education technology field, including some product roles that you had at Coursera to use Skillshare. You worked also on learning design and how learning design is shaped by AI. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself a bit better than that to our listeners. Who are you, and what is your work about?
Sure. I have been working in education technology for over 15 years now, but in a lot of different capacities. I got into it originally because I was spending a lot of time in my 20s tutoring and substitute teaching and working in sort of peripherally within the education system. And I started to realize very quickly that students' lives were increasingly infused with technology. When they would go home and have homework to do on one hand, and online games and social media and all the different technological advances that were happening at that time on the other, they were having this really difficult choice, and increasingly sort of choosing the technology. And it made me realize that education and technology are not implicitly opposites. They shouldn't be. And in fact, put together, they can be incredibly powerful. So that drove me into the education technology field. I went to Teachers College, Columbia University, studied instructional design and technology with the amazing team there, and came out right at the moment where venture capital was starting to really move into the education technology field, where they was starting to feel like real energy about what ed tech could be. The term ed tech was just sort of being formed at that time, but this was around 2008, and people were really starting to see the potential for education technology. So I started at a startup in New York called Newton. At the time, that was the number one most the best funded education technology company in the country, trying to do adaptive learning. We were working on all sorts of different things that were, I think, frankly, ahead of their time, but a lot of really interesting work there and amazing people there. And from there, have been on a journey of a lot of different education technology companies of very different types of learners, different ages, different, adult learners, very young learners. We've done reading products for K2. I've worked with high school. I've done sort of everything in the space, or many different things in the space. I moved to California for Coursera because that was that was in 2013. That movement of getting elite and high quality colleges all around the world online. I immediately recognized that was something that really had never happened before. Online education up to that point was very stigmatized. It was almost all in the for-profit space. So this idea of, altruistic, high quality education, professors from Duke and Harvard and Yale and everyone going online was an incredibly exciting moment. So a few years ago, after many such roles, you named a couple of other ones I haven't even talked about, I sort of took a step back. And during the pandemic, when education technology had, as your listeners would know, this enormous boom, because everybody suddenly had to be learning online, and there was just incredible excitement in the space. I decided to take a sort of step back and take the 10,000-foot view and say, what is this field that we are calling EdTech? It's happening all over the world. It's happening with many different sectors, in workforce training, in higher education, in K-12, in early childhood, and decided to think about, what is happening right now that is actually exciting for across the space. Things that are happening in one sector that other people might be interested in learning about. How might I sort of create visibility in this new space in a place where there aren't that many media outlets? There isn't that much visibility. There was sort of no go-to, EdTech media outlet. So I created a company called EdTech Insiders. It's basically a community where everybody can sort of have visibility into what's happening. It started as a podcast, as you know, Svenia. You were a guest on it after you wrote your book, did that amazing project where you went all over Europe interviewing EdTech founders. We also have had a newsletter. We've had a lot of in-person events. And it's been a really amazing journey because we've brought together people from absolutely all over the world, every different sector. And I think it's really filled a gap in the space where so many people, especially post pandemic, where a lot of people are working remotely, are working on these incredibly important, interesting, fascinating, really cutting edge projects, but often in isolation from each other or without a lot of cross sector visibility. Then, of course, 2022, AI hit the scene, and this entire new wave of edtech was created. And since then, we've created market maps of what is happening in the generative AI space in K-12 with hundreds and hundreds of tools. We've done a huge number of interviews. We're at 450 interviews on the podcast,
Wow.
many of which are with AI native founders or people in incumbent companies, big edtech companies who are thinking about what does AI mean for the future of edtech. And as you know, recently I just started working with the ASU GSV Summit. It's absolutely incredible, sort of the top edtech conference, certainly in the U.S., if not the world, and working on the edtech programming and community there. So it's been
Amazing.
quite a journey.
What
Hope
a
that isn't
journey.
too much.
What
Yeah.
a journey, Alex. What a journey. You're an EdTech veteran for sure.
Yes.
And it's quite impressive, your journey and everything that you've done from being an operator to being a community leader, a thought leader with your podcast, and now working at the biggest, most incredible conference in EdTech, ASU GSV. Please remind us, for those who are listening, when it is this year
When it is,
and
it's
where to
April.
find, yeah, where to find the
Absolutely.
info.
It's April 12th through 15th, and in San Diego. It has been in San Diego for a number of years. It is truly a massive and really, really important conference in EdTech, partially because it really brings together CEOs, superintendents of districts in the U.S., people from all over the world who are doing over 1,000 EdTech entrepreneurs, over 1,000 EdTech, over 1,000 school superintendents. It has a huge workforce angle. There's a lot of people there from huge companies all over the world doing really, really fascinating and cutting edge things in learning and development. It is a conference that, if you have been there, you sort of know that it is this whirlwind of ideas and deal making and meetings and incredible panels and program, but also just a lot of people connecting in the hallways, just trying to figure out the future of this field and making real time deals. A lot of investors, a lot of private equity is there, venture capital is there, angel investors. It is truly a sort of meeting of the minds of everybody, is certainly in the U.S. and again very international, who is thinking about
Absolutely.
edtech. It's an amazing event. So
Yeah,
honored to be part of it.
you you made it really international, and now it's the go-to event even for Europeans. We know that
Ah,
we cannot miss this. Definitely. I'm very much interested in the insights that you've got from those 450 plus conversations on your podcast at Tech Insiders. And I'm very much interested in picking your brain on the topic of AI and how it's completely reshifting the way we learn. And so the first question would be like, of all of your guests, who taught you the most surprising lesson or the most eye-opening lesson about AI in learning? Or I know it's hard to find one, but maybe
it
if you
is.
have a few in mind, I'm happy to hear them.
I mean, boy, it is very hard to pick just one. But I mean, one surprising guest that I thought was incredibly exciting to think about this space. We actually talked to Pierre Lamont, who is the head of the Project Management Institute. And I think it was an amazing conversation, and it surprised me because this is an organization that's been around a long time. It's been very out front in terms of accreditation of a field. You know, project management is a very regulated and very documented field, very clearly, and they have a lot of different certifications that have been, you know, sort of industry standards for a long time. And coming into the AI space from that angle was a really unusual one. It was, you know, we talked to a lot of ed tech companies that work with consumers, ed tech companies that sell to schools or colleges, but this is one that sort of sells to individual professionals around the world and has a very, very clear body of knowledge. And it was interesting to hear how they thought about AI and really advancing what they were doing, given that they have this huge corpus of data, proprietary data. You know, both some of it is public proprietary data, including their source material, their study material, all of that kind of thing, and some of it is internal private proprietary data, which is decades of work from project managers all around the world taking the test, studying for the tests, really making their way through this career trajectory. So that's the one that jumps to mind as you ask that. But boy, we have talked to so many people. I mean, we talked to Sam Altman. We literally talked to Sam Altman from OpenAI on the podcast. It was an
Wow.
incredible experience about the future of education. We've talked to Sal Khan about the future of education. We've talked to the CEOs of massive ed tech companies. It's been really interesting what Houghton Mifflin is doing. Is a publisher in the US, been around 200 years, and they have this AI lab inside their company where they're really thinking about how can they advance what they're doing given their huge proprietary data, their massive, you know, historic impact in the field, and their massive reach, again, global reach. It's hard to pick just one because it's this web of ideas. I mean, those are some of the bigger companies. You also get incredibly interesting insights from founders who are just starting their companies in this AI era. We've talked to people doing really, really unusual and interesting things. One product I find really fascinating is a product called Literal. It's a reading application for teenagers, basically. But what it does is it turns classic literature or you know, curriculum aligned literature into text messages that can go back and forth. So you can actually read literally, you know, Dostoevsky as a series of texts where every character has a profile, and they're these modern looking people. And I mean, it is people are just trying so many different kinds of experiments in this era, and and when I say people, it's everybody, right? I mean, everybody from the single founder in their dorm room who has an idea for how people can study better or how they might help dyslexic students. We talked to a founder who's doing turning, you know, text into video that has subtitles designed for dyslexic students to try to sort of map together what they're doing, try to support students with special needs. There, I mean, from single founders just with these ideas to these enormous companies. We've talked to Google a lot. We've had many conversations with the entire Google team and the Google education team, and it's just literally mind blowing what they're doing with with games, with video, with reading technology, with, you know, with Nano Banana, with Google Classroom. They have incorporated quizzes and flashcards and every type of learning material into their Google Notebook product. You know, I could go on. There's so much out there, but what I find most interesting and surprising is how, you know, you can talk to the smallest individual founders and the largest edtech companies, and everybody is at the same time grappling with this new technology that we all know is going to be transformative, and we all are trying to support its evolution in a way that sort of stays ahead of any negative backlash. It stays ahead of any overly over commercialization that may happen. And I think the edtech field is at a really important inflection point because we're trying to turn this technology into something that is a truly positive force in the world that drives actual learning outcomes, that drives actual engagement and motivation, that changes the trajectory of schooling. But I think there's a ticking clock on it because there's a lot of technology backlash right now. People are worried about screen time. They're worried about social media. They're worried about AI. And at any moment, I think there could be a, you know, a pretty significant pushback. So it's a dramatic moment, and we just saw the Congress in the U.S. Big testimonies from ed tech companies and about the AI and students. So it's an amazing moment. It's like very dramatic and
It
exciting.
is. It is. What do you think about this backlash?
I think I get it. I mean, I get it. I think we are living in a moment. I am a huge AI optimist. Anybody who has listened to the podcast or even hears me talk about it now, I think AI could and should be one of the most revolutionary and positive technologies for education that we've ever seen, along with the internet, along with reading itself, along with literature. Yet, I sympathize. I mean, we've talked to people who on the podcast who work with deep fakes, who literally consult with schools about how to deal with deep fakes. It is that's very scary. I mean, you can there deep fakes can mean lots of different things. There are deep fakes where people will post pictures of the school on fire to try to get to the school to evacuate, but AI images. I mean, with a technology this powerful that we don't yet fully understand, I completely understand why many people are skeptical, worried, and coming out of this era of social media where we've sort of all been very, excited. You remember a decade ago, people felt like social media was a very exciting movement in education as well. And you had companies like Schoology, you had EdTech companies that were actively trying to look and feel like Facebook or like Instagram because social media was sort of so hot and there was not yet a negative backlash. And now, the research is sort of out, and social media has caused a huge amount of anxiety and depression and fear of missing out and a lot of real problems. And I think people are really worried about that same cycle happening here, where there's so much hype. There you see all of these tech entrepreneurs and these tech company leaders saying AI is going to change everything. It's going to be amazing. And I think regular people and parents are starting to say, we've heard this story before and it doesn't always work out that way. And I think the skepticism is, I wouldn't say it's fully warranted. I think it's a little overblown, but I understand it. And I really think it's a race against time for us in the ed tech field. I think those who want to use AI to enhance learning, to make education better in any way, need to prove it. We
Hmm.
need to prove that it can work that way, because there is going to definitely be regulation, both in Europe and in the US and around the world in different ways, less in some countries than other. But we really, I think it's on us to prove it. And frankly, I don't think we did prove it during the pandemic, right? We mentioned that was the moment when sort of ed tech was everywhere. People were doing their entire school through Zoom, through Khan Academy, through IXL, through all of these online tools, and learning outcomes did not grow at all. There was a massive learning loss. And many in the field talk about that was emergency ed tech. It was unplanned. It was not structured. It was a it was not, organized in the way it should have been.
Indeed.
But even so, I think, our field needs to step up and really blow people's minds, really show that education can change. So
Hmm.
I think the backlash is real, and we need to stay ahead of it. Is my short answer.
And so we hear that you are an AI enthusiast for sure. How would you design the school of the future? If you would design a school that would last for at least ten years from now and still be relevant, how would you design it? And what are the core skills that you would teach in that school?
Yeah, what a great question. That's a complicated question, but I will give you some of the core facets, the core tenets that I would instill into a school of the future, given everything that I've learned about AI and I learned about education over these years and ed tech over the years. So, I mean, one thing that I think is incredibly key for where we're going for what schooling should look like is that AI can be a very isolating technology, and I have increasingly come to really be excited about the idea of AI as a facilitator of human relationships, AI as a way to keep people connected, to find common interests, to matchmake, to elevate conversations that are already happening, like the one we're having right now. So I feel like the school of the future, it will have some elements of direct AI teaching, where you can definitely imagine some of the things that we hear about a lot. Students having individual AI companions or tutors that they can go to ask questions. They can do that at almost any time. They have access to them. Maybe not any time, but they have access to them, and it's personalized to them. It understands their learning journey. It understands it's connected to their student information system and their learning management system, so it knows the school schedule. It knows their classes. It knows their grades. It knows their background. I think that there is a lot of power in that personalization of AI. At the same time, I don't think it should be isolating, that everybody should be sort of have their own little Jiminy Cricket AI with them, and that's their main social relationship. I think that's pretty dystopian. So I'm really excited about a lot of the AI tooling and thinking where AI can be facilitators in a classroom. It can facilitate small group instruction. It can actually facilitate online instruction if you're working with people who are not physically with you. It can matchmake. So thought a lot about AI as a way to be a what we call motivational translator. So help students understand why they're learning what they're learning. Help teachers understand why students may be resisting some of the things they're learning. Sort of act as almost like a universal translating layer that works between people. Obviously, that's also official translation in terms of language, but universal translating layer in that every student, when they look at another student, the AI can help them understand what that student is working on, what they're excited about, what they care about when they're not in their school hours. When a teacher looks at the class, they can understand where the misconceptions are. They can understand who might be great to group together to do a group project, or who might be great to group together to do peer tutoring.
Mm.
So I think the school of the future is going to be is sort of the AI will be present, but it will not be as, sort of on individual students as we may expect it to be now. And the EdTech will be present, and it won't be on as many individual students as now. So we've seen a lot of school models where, students spend a certain amount of time doing, personalized learning on their own, and then walk away from it and connect with each other. And I think it's going to be a little bit of more of a hybrid there, where the students will have they will have their AI in their back pocket, but while they're in a school environment, they're going to be together. The AI will help them more when they're at home. The AI will help them more when they're struggling with concepts, or when they want to go deep and extend their thinking. But when they're in an actual school building with lots of other students, the AI will be used to facilitate and smooth out and enhance the relationships between all the humans in the building. That
Hmm.
I'm more and more excited about what that future looks like.
I love that vision. It's so beautiful to see AI as a translator and as a connector between humans rather than something that you become dependent upon at some point.
Exactly.
Right. So I really really love that vision. And so, do you think there are particular skills that are needed for kids to navigate that world and to also be able to use AI in that way?
Yeah, it's such a good question. People in this field will know that there is a whole series of big conversations about every aspect of skill-based learning, of AI literacy, which is trying to sort of define what skills are evolving and more necessary in the AI era. There are lots of different frameworks. They're very interesting. Um, my core belief about this is that it's a sort of it in many ways it boils back down to some core psychological sort of self-efficacy, motivation, agility, like mental agility, not feeling fixed in any one structure, sort of being excited to try new things, confidence. I feel like, and I know those are not skills per se, they're sort of affect or traits, but I really think that we should start there, because we're at this really strange moment where people talk about durable skills, or there's a lot of different names for this, but I really actually my personal take is I don't think we know what a great AI, you know, worker looks like, right? And if you're trying to sort of like somebody working in a world where AI is infused everywhere is what I mean by that. So if we're trying to sort of look to 10 years down the road and say, okay, in 10 years, people who are 10 now, 9 and 10 now, or 12 now are going to be sort of entering the workforce. What will they need to be able to do in 10 years? 10 years is such a long time in technology right now. We are at this asymptotic growth of technology. I think it's a little bit of a speculation to say,
Mm,
oh, they're going to need this exact skill. They're going to need to know this exact tool. They're going to need to know this exact thing. I think we should teach tools in the classroom, but I think we should teach tools in the service of knowing that you're going to need to learn new tools continuously in this new world. You're going to need to be able to pick up a new system and make sense of it, and make sense of it in your personal context, and figure out how to optimize it for your work. You're going to need to, you know, be a lifelong learner. Seems obvious to say, but it's a big one. So I feel like we're early enough where we should be focusing on the sort of psychological constructs that underlie the skills. And as
absolutely.
the skill, as we get closer to the future and the actual skills get a little clearer, just like with the coding revolution, right? It's like you wouldn't have wanted to just teach all coding at the beginning of computers or the internet, because the languages that were happening there are went extinct, right?
Mhm.
My father was an early coder, and he worked at IBM, he worked at NASA. The languages he learned to get those jobs very quickly were surpassed. So
Yeah.
it wasn't knowing the language that was the core skill. It was the ability to learn a new coding language and spend time with it and make sense of it. And that's really like a meta skill. So that's my best answer, and it's a little bit of a hand wave, but that's my thinking right now.
No, it makes perfect sense. And what you're saying is that we should focus on metacognitive skills. Metacognition, learning how to learn, should be the core skill, right? From what I hear you saying, because we're gonna be lifelong learners and never stop learning. So, yeah. And Alex, you're a dad, right? How
Yes.
old are your kids?
They're 1 and 3, so they're very
Okay, so
small.
very small. Okay. Um, like when you see how how technology evolves and yeah, and how fast everything changes, how do you see this future for your kids? Like, are you worried? Are you excited? Like on this world that they're gonna inherit, basically.
It's a great question. I am not worried yet. I may be worried at some point, but I'm not worried yet, because I think that many of the things that are many of the types of technology and the types of working with technology that we're seeing among tweens and teens right now, I feel like are beginning to really change, partially because of the backlash we've talked about in regulation. Schools are starting to ban phones in the US. By many states have done that. There's a sort of uh a much broader realization that technology everywhere at all times, that has come with our phones and has come with social media and sort of always on applications, has a negative effect. I feel like that has now taken root, and 10 years from now, when my kids are teens and tweens, I think there will be a much more sophisticated understanding of that, which is good. So I'm not yet worried about that aspect of things. I will say the one thing that has been really intriguing about being a parent, being sort of on the consumer side, for lack of a better word, of ed tech, is that as a parent, your time, you realize how much your children's time is very limited, and it I think as an ed tech entrepreneur, or as an operator working in all these different tools, you sort of think of the other side of the table, whether it's schools or consumers, as like, they'll try it. They'll try all these different things, and they'll see what happens, and they'll see what sticks, and like, why wouldn't they try it? And from the parent side, you say, oh, I know why they wouldn't try it, because there's a cost, not only a financial cost, but a sort of time cost, a learning cost. Trying new things, switching between applications, trying new ed tech tools really does take some time and energy, and you can't do 100 of that. You can't say, oh, I want the best tool for my kids, so I'm going to try 20 different reading applications and find the absolute best one. And the signals out there, frankly, are not great. It's not, even somebody very deep in the field, I can't just say, okay, I'm going to name you the top three of every ed tech tool there is. I could just tell you exactly what it is. The signals are not that good. There's not all as much evidence as we'd like. We all know that in the field to say like this is the best proven tool, but there's also not even great social evidence often. Not There's not always great places to go to say, oh, this is the absolute favorite tool. Like there's no critics in the same way that they're out there, but they're not, the ecosystem that we have to find like the best movie to rent or, watch, the best book to buy. It still doesn't fully exist in edtech. People have been working on it, but it's still not fully there. So I found it really interesting to sort of realize how much of a consumer gap there is in terms of adoption and trying to figure out how to piece together the pieces. Even as somebody who could literally sit here and name you 400 ed tech companies off the top of my head, it's still not. It's still not clear to me, and if it's not clear to me, it must be completely opaque to people who are
That's
not in
for
the field.
sure. But don't you think that it's also because there's no one size fits all in tech, that, so many products are so personalized and answering so many different needs, special needs kids or kids from that age range, or, and so there's so much like personalization in tech that it's hard to say for this age group, these are the three best tools. Because it really
Yeah,
depends.
I think that is part of it, but personalization, I mean, when we made our K-12 AI market map, we thought about doing differentiation, personalization as a category, and we quickly realized we couldn't do it that way because every tool in AI especially has major elements of personalization. Some are focus on it. It's sort of their core value proposition. Others just sort of bake it in because in an AI world, you're going back and forth. It's much less of a structured, where you're just doing level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Less and less ed tech is like that, and more is personalized, customizable, individualized. So yes, and then that's even beyond what you're saying, Svenia, which is that their whole tools can be for special populations. They can be for certain types of kids who have certain interests, or certain kids who have certain special needs, or certain ways of learning that they prefer. You're absolutely right, but the the flip side of that is it's not always obvious what your own child needs, and that's true both in a sort of diagnosing special needs, trying to figure out autism, ADHD, dyslexia. That is even that, which is very formalized, is not always easy. People have a lot of time, a lot of trouble navigating and getting the proper diagnoses and getting them paid for, and the testing. There's all of that, but even outside of the special needs world, it's not always clear whether your individual child, what media they like to learn in, what length of a session that they're sort of optimized for. Like these aren't things you can just immediately pick up by watching them. You say, "Oh, my kid loves 15-minute, really fast, high energy." It's not always that clear. So I think we're heading towards that world. I really do. But where we will have AI ed tech tools that can help sort of identify how students want to learn, how they like to learn, what's going to work for them, what's going to be most efficient, effective, and exciting, for lack of a better series
Yeah.
of words. But like it's not quite there yet. So you have to sort of figure out your child and then figure out this vast, complex edtech ecosystem. Now, I mean, I'm very optimistic. I love these edtech tools. I love the edtech companies. I think they're incredibly effective. And we've seen lots of evidence. I think, edtech gets a bad rap for not having enough evidence, but we do have a lot of tools do have really strong evidence, and we have seen a lot of really positive outcomes from using technology. But in an individual case, as a parent, putting together the pieces is harder than you'd think.
I can imagine lots of noise and opacity as well, because there are a lot of players,
Yeah.
and that's the same for schools. Like, how do you make the right choice if you have so many different choices, so many different options? So I fully get what you're saying. Must be quite tough. And so my question to you would be, if you were to start a company, or if you were to advise someone who would want to start a company in edtech right now, like what is the most underrated sectors, vertical in the space right now? Are the things that the thing that you're most interested from a parent's perspective, or just you, like where would you start, or which vertical would you pick?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to give a little bit of a sort of upside down answer to that, but hopefully it'll be helpful to your listeners. Which is that, you know, after looking, carefully at the space, interviewing a lot of people, and sort of being an observer, I would say that one thing we see very often in the ed tech world is that there are ideas that many people have simultaneously in ed tech, especially when new technology like AI comes along. And there's a instinct for lots of people to do the same thing. And so there's a lot of sort of areas of what they call red ocean in ed tech, where there's lots of competitors over one small, not necessarily small, it can be a large market, but lots of competitors in the same exact space. So what I would do if I were starting an ed tech company now, and what I've seen a lot of people succeed doing, is they try to make sense of the space, and they look at the areas that are actually very crowded. So like right now, there are many. I've noticed a huge number of AI language learning apps,
Yes.
some of which are breaking through and making some impact, some of which are not, but there are a lot, and there are new ones all the time. The App Store is filled with them. They're launching all over the place. And you can understand why. It's incredibly exciting. The AI language space is, the idea of having conversation partners that can look like anything, the idea of having auto translation, there's lots of different ways of learning language that have been unlocked by AI, and many people are jumping into it. That's exciting, and I think it's going to change the space, but I would not necessarily start another AI language learning company at this moment, just because it is a very frothy space right now. There's lots of people doing it. Simultaneously, there's been a ton of companies moving into science of reading, early reading, recently, both incumbents and new companies, because AI can do some really interesting things with readers. But it's a very frothy space. Science of reading, as your listeners may know, in the US, there's been a long, they call the reading wars, lots of philosophical debate about the pedagogy of reading. And we've sort of finally come down on the side that is much more evidence based, which is really a core phonics approach. And we're sort of calling it the science of reading. All these states have changed their laws to focus on scientific approaches. But because of that, the market's huge, and lots of people are chasing it at the same time. So what I've seen some people do that I think is a really smart way to approach starting a new company at this moment is, think about your core capacity. Who are you? What do you care about? What kind of student? What kind of learning? What kind of age student are you? Do you care about workforce development? Do you care about early childhood? What do you care about? What are you passionate about? What is the area of education you want to truly really dive deep into and spend a lot of time thinking about and caring about and adapting and pivoting and all the things that happen when you have a startup. But then look at where everybody's running, and see what are the areas that are not where people really aren't running it. Because what's so interesting about AI is it really can be a sort of force multiplier in virtually any area. And so I think a lot of people chase the same few balls in ed tech, but I've seen some companies do things, and it's funny because it's sometimes very counterintuitive. You'll see a company and you're like, they're focusing on this one specific area. I just interviewed a entrepreneur who's doing, accessibility compliance with AI. It's like how to get ed tech companies to be accessibility compliant using a full AI stack,
Wow.
where they do the auditing all the way through the certification. That is very specific. It's very sort of insidery, but it's also a huge need. A huge market. It affects almost everybody in the space, both in education and outside. And it's something AI is incredibly good at, because it's super well regulated. I mean, super well documented, and it's this corpus of information that AI can do. It can code, it can audit, it can write. Obviously, it can interpret lots of legal text. Um, and there are others like that as well. I mean, we've seen really interesting companies focus on things like Medicare funding in schools. Sorry, Medicaid funding in schools, like how to make sure that schools are getting the right amount of reimbursements, of sort of health reimbursements, or people who are starting to focus on incredibly specific areas of of special ed. You know, certain populations in special education that they're really like totally underserved, and if you go in there, there's a huge number of parents or schools that are working with it. You know, I've come around on this because I love flashy new things. I love big markets. You know, working at Coursera, it was like 100 million users. Like, I love that kind of giant play. But I've come to really appreciate entrepreneurs who start to who look at the space and say, well, everybody's running that way, and there's a pocket right here. It's a really pressing need. There's a lot of people who really care about it. There's a lot of people who it's a pain point for a lot of people, but almost nobody's there. And say, can I really make that work in a repeated way that actually will change the whole
Yeah.
ecosystem? So
Find your niche, basically. Find your niche and go for it.
find your
Don't
niche and
go
go
for the
for it. Yeah.
mainstream.
Or if you're going to do a big play, do something truly different, right? Because there's a lot of players in a lot of the spaces right now. So if you're going to go really big, if you're going to do something for, you know, math learning, boy, there's a lot of companies doing math in almost any capacity you could think of. You need something a really different approach. And by really different, it's like many layers of different. It can't just be more engaging. It can't just be more visual. It can't just be more you know, based on a Singapore math. Like, you know, you have to you have to really go deep to do something that's different, because there's been so many people hitting that space for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex. Last question is, who should be our next guest on Education Futures? We want to have guests who think a bit differently. So we want to have guests like you who have so much experience. We've talked to so many people. We also love to have scientists on board. So we had neuroscientists, we had social scientists, we had different types of sciences, because when we think about the future of education, we can't just think about it from one lens. So we love to have as many lenses as possible and perspectives to look at this topic. So if you have a guest that stands out from the ones that you interviewed, or someone else you have in mind, I'm very curious to know your thoughts.
Boy, it would be a long list, but a couple that come to mind that I would recommend for you. So, Natalia Kursakova, do you know,
Yes,
has done
amazing.
incredibly interesting work about sort of building education evidence frameworks and really trying to elevate the entire field with regards to what makes proper evidence. She's a professor out of a Scandinavian professor. She's totally amazing. I find her work really interesting and just a very come from a very different angle. The other thing I'd say is there's an amazing book coming out by Maya Bialik and Peter Nilsson, both EdTech AI entrepreneurs, and it's really about, it's called like How AI Will Change Everything and Nothing in Teaching and Learning. I'm probably butchering that, but it's coming out in just a couple of weeks. It's a
Nice.
really interesting framework, and they're both really thoughtful. Maya Bialik is a researcher. She's written about AI in education, you know, in the past a lot, and studied it. I think find her I find her work really enlightening. So that's where I would go next. But boy, I mean, there are so many interesting people out there. You know, where
I,
what's been so fun about doing EdTech Insiders is you just never run out of incredible people to talk to.
I know.
Um,
I know.
uh, any area you know, any area you want to learn more about, there's people doing truly mind blowing work in it.
Yeah, that's what's amazing in this field. I completely agree. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time today. And yeah, please, everyone, listen to Alex's podcast and come to ASU GSV if you can.
Please. Oh yes.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Svenia.